Good morning and good Chodesh. We're still in the middle of our discussion about flattery. Rabbi Gimel emailed me something which I thought was interesting concerning yesterday's discussion about flattery. So we suggested an interpretation that makes it very personal, a struggle between the godly soul, the animal soul, not to flatter the animal soul, not to treat the animal, not to give yourself excuses and treat your negativity as if it was a positive, flattering it, calling the wicked righteous.
You said the animal soul is angry.
And the animal soul itself is upset. That's right.
I wonder if making excuses is a form of flattery.
That's the point. Exactly.
That is.
You're excusing your animal soul by flattering it and saying, oh, no, you're good. In reality, if we're a little more honest, we understand that's not good. So and quoting the verse, he's calling the wicked righteous, right, within. And Rabbi Gimel suggested maybe on a national level, which also falls in line because we have the reference to the struggle between Jacob and Esau, which is the struggle between Jerusalem and Rome, predated by Bilam, who tries to curse but says, I can't curse because only God, I can only curse that which God doesn't curse. And there's a reference to unborn children, the fetuses and nations, in that the effect of the struggle between the nationality of Jerusalem versus Rome affects not just those who are now alive, but next generations as well. Right? So knowing that the way in which you deal with your ruling wicked nations affects not just yourself, but the generations to come. So even the fetus is cursed. Right? That was one of the things mentioned yesterday. So that's very interesting. Okay. So Lezer further states, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom, fourth word. V'omer Rabbi Lezer says, Kol adam, any person, sheyesh by chanufa, any person who has within him the character flaw of flattery. We noted this, that the Gemara describes. Sometimes the Gemara, as we'll see in the next teaching, that the Gemara speaks negatively about the act of flattery. That would be the next teaching. In other cases, as is the case here, the Gemara is commenting not on the act of flattery, which we already said in certain circumstances is necessary, especially when you're dealing with a wicked overlord. You have to flatter to keep people, to protect the populace. But here it refers to specifically someone who has the character flaw of flattery, meaning to say the person has gone so dishonest that they're constantly looking for means to achieve whatever they want by manipulating others using flattery. So it's not just a question of the act of flattery, which sometimes could be used properly, but someone who has that character flaw. He has within him this flaw of flattery, which is essentially dishonesty. So this person, says Rabbi Lezer, Neufel Gehenim, falls into purgatory, into hell. Okay. Shenemar, as the verse reads, so I'm going to pick up the verse in Isaiah. I'm looking at the screen here. It's Isaiah chapter 5. Why am I on 6? It should be 5. Verse 20, right? Is it here? No. Yeah, it's 5:20. Let's see. Verse reads, woe to those who are wise in their own eyes. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. Verse 20. Woe to those who say of the evil that he is good. And of good that it is evil. Right before the verse we had yesterday, was the Isaiah the chapter before. That's why I had the other chapter open. Yesterday the verse was the person who refers to the wicked as righteous, talking about a person or a character. Here he's talking about refers to good as bad and refers to bad as good, as an object, not as a person. Further, sorry. What are you saying? He knows that distinction? But you see that distinction, right? Yesterday he said, Yes, you say to the wicked that he is righteous. Here you refer to bad as good and good as bad, or evil as good and good as evil, as an object. Right? Which itself is character flaw and flattery, the lack of the dishonesty about that. It's not just about people, but about things and behaviors and actions and entities, not just about people. Right? Some they present darkness as light. And they refer to light as darkness. Mar lamotik, motik lamar. Present bitter as sweet, and sweet as bitter. Chassidus there would sometimes quote this verse to describe the depth of exile, where darkness itself is seen as light, in the sense that materialism is seen as the light. A person achieves material success, and he feels like he found the good, he found the light. When in reality, that is his exile. There's a deep exile that he refers to as exile as a positive. Right? In generations prior, it was pretty clear. This is exile, we're suffering. In our generation, where we're having a nice time in exile, at least by and large, at a societal level, materialistically, we're doing well. It's easy to forget that we're in exile. And the very materialism that we worship is the exile. So don't place the darkness to light and the light darkness. Right? So then there are a number of verses that continue saying similar things. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and their own estimation of profound understanding. Right? The Talmud only quoted verse 20. It began it and said, etc. Right? What did it say? It said, Hoya, woe to those who say good, wicked, and wicked, good, etc. We read the rest of the verse. And then the verse goes on to describe further like mistaken thinking. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes. Verse 22, woe to the heroes to drink wine, and valiant men to mix strong wine. They're strong, but they become weak because of their proclivity toward alcohol. Those who exonerate the guilty one for reward of a bribe, and the innocence of the innocent they take away from him, which is a reference to something we said earlier, which is that flattery corrupts judgment, because everything becomes dishonest. So the person who's innocent is stripped of his innocence. The person who's guilty is seen as innocent because of a bribe. Everything's ulterior motive. Everything is built on dishonesty. Now here's the next verse the Gemara quotes to prove that someone who goes down this path of dishonesty, founded on flattery, referring to negativity as good and good as negative, right? Everything is mished when the person has this character of flattery, where he's constantly looking for ulterior motives and how he can use things around him. So something which is inherently a negative thing, that'll find a way to spin it good to make it so that he can get what he wants. And something which is good, he doesn't even see the good because he doesn't see the ulterior motive he can get out of it. Right? This kind of dishonesty concludes the verse in verse 24. Therefore, as a flame of fire consumes stubble, a flame of fire that consumes the kash, the straw. They call it stubble, straw. Chaff, yeah. And a flame shrivels straw. So too, these people, their roots shall be like rot, and their blossom shall go up like dust. For they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts, and the word of the Holy One of Israel they have despised. That's the next verse the Gemara quotes. So I'm reading this whole verse because on the simple reading of the Gemara, you would assume, or correctly assume, that's referring to hell, life after death. Punishment. The person lives a whole deceptive life where everything is, narcissistically motivated by ulterior motive, and even his compliments are not compliments, and his insults are not insults. Nothing is honest. Refers to bad as good and good as bad, and so on. Okay, so the punishment is the person ends up in Gehenna. But when you read the verse literally, just the verse itself, you get the sense that the verse is not talking about life after death, or at least not only, but also in your very lifetime. Because you're built on a house of lies, like the fire eats straw. How fast does it take for a flame to consume straw? Seconds, because the whole thing is fake to begin with. That's the point here. Your whole house is a house of straw. And you constantly have to prop it up with more lies. Person lies, and then they have to lie more to protect the lie, and then that lie gets stuck and have to lie more to protect that lie. So it's like a house of straw.
No foundation.
There's no foundation. It's not built on solid ground. It's constantly
an appearance of.
It's the appearance of a big structure, but the whole thing is straw. And then so it's not just right, because you would think here, if you're talking about hell, life after death, it's not like fire burns straw, that's seconds. It's like fire that burns coal. I don't know, the person suffers in hell for years and years. That's not the way it's described here as someone that's suffering for a long time. It's describing someone whose entire foundation in seconds is burnt up. Because that's the problem here. The issue is not, it's not punishment in the classic sense. The person's punished that he goes to hell, suffering for years and years because of what he did. It's a description of what happens if your whole life is built on straw, because you're referring to good as bad and bad as good and light and darkness, and you're flattering, and you constantly a whole web of manipulation around you built on lies and lies and lies. The whole thing is straw. House of cards, the whole thing crumbles in a second. Like a fire consumes straw, that's how this all goes down. So it's perhaps then it's not a Gehenna of life after death, but a Gehenna right here.
Actually,
You're building your own hell right in this world. And you see it with people, unfortunately. That's right. I was reading a commentary from the Rebbe related to this parsha. Just the end of the parsha describes the story of the Tower of Babel, one of the enigmatic stories, because it's only a couple of verses in the Torah, and it's somewhat a little difficult sometimes to extrapolate what exactly the message is trying to relay. And the basic message, of course, is the arrogance of success. The person's building a tower, and they say we don't need God because we can do what we want. Right? It's the arrogance of success. That's essentially the message there. So the Rebbe points out here, the verse says like this. The verse says they left the east and they went to the valley of Shinar, which is like Babylonia. And there they built building using brick and mortar by firing it up in a kiln. And those bricks became their stone. Seems like an irrelevant detail. What's the difference between stone or brick? And if they fired it up in a kiln or not? Like the Torah is not giving us recipe on how to make bricks. Seems like an irrelevant detail. So explains the Rebbe like this. They left the east. This is based on commentaries from earlier sages and so on. They left the east being Eretz Yisrael, where they were, land of Israel, where their stone is readily available. And you don't do anything to stone to make it into a brick. It's already a brick. Hashem provides. You don't have to put that much effort to build your home. Then they went to exile. Went to Babylonia to exile. And in exile, God's blessings are concealed. Thank you. In exile, God's blessings are concealed. And when God's blessings are concealed, you got to work harder to make a living. You got to build those bricks. You have to mix brick and mortar. You got to fire it up. You can't just take the natural resources and build your home. Spiritually speaking, you can't just access spirituality on its own. You got to invest. You got to build those bricks. And it includes a fire, which is this passion.
Requires energy.
Requires lots of energy.
Fuel.
Energy and passion and fuel. Both physically, materially, we have to work hard for a living, and spiritually, we got to work hard for a spiritual achievement. And there goes on to describe from the Kabbalah, which talks about the connection between the bricks of Egypt and the bricks of the Tower of Babel. And the point almost being that you have a choice. You're either building a home for God, or you're building a home for your own arrogance. And if you're building a home for your own arrogance, like the Tower of Babel, you end up in Egypt, where you're building bricks for other people. Right? And here seems to be a whole nother angle, where the person's ignoring the building of bricks and just building a house of straw. All right, so putting effort, but not even a solid foundation, just complete straw. And in a second, the whole thing falls apart. It's built on a house of lies. Okay, so the next statement from Rabbi Lezer. So third, I'm skipping these two lines here because we just quoted it from the actual verse. Okay, third line from the bottom of the page. Rabbi Lezer says, anyone who flatters his friend. So here, the Gemara does not use the language kol ad mishesh bechanufa, anyone who has the flattery character flaw within them. Here it says anyone who flatters his friends. We're talking about the act now, but different here. And it would follow, as we'll see in a moment, because we're talking about the specific relationship between the flatterer and the flatteree. That's a word.
Are we shifting from external to internal?
Reverse, from internal to external.
Oh, so friend, sorry. That's
Yeah, from internal to external. Yeah, yes, correct. Because till now, we're talking about the effect flattery has on the person's own character. On his own character, he becomes a person of his house burns down, right? He brings wrath into the world because he's ruining society by bringing this dishonesty, right? It's not about the relationship. It doesn't make a difference who he happened to have flattered. It's the character that he has. But here we're going to talk about the specific relationship between the flattery and the flatterer. That's the word. Yeah, it's not a word. You know what I'm talking about.
Flattery.
Flattery and the flatterer. Yeah. So anyone who flatters his friend, so if the end will be noifel biyadai, he will fall into the hands of his flatterer, the one he flattered. Right? In other words,
The flatterer falls in the hands of the flattery.
that's right. You're trying to deceive the other person to get what you want. The end is going to be the way around. He's going to have, he'll have leverage over you.
Does this suggest that the person you're flattering, you're subservient to?
That's right. And so at some point in time, you're going to become subservient to that person because the person has leverage on you.
And that's why he can
And that's right.
destroy you in the end.
That's right. As it continues, if you don't fall into the hand of the person you flattered, you'll fall into the hand of his children. If you don't fall into the hand of his children, you'll fall into the hands of his grandkids. But at some point,
You're going to pay.
you're going to pay. There's no such thing as a free lunch. My grandfather, my mother's father said it. Charlie used to say this. Nothing is for free. You're either paying now or you're paying later. Certainly when it's dishonesty. You either pay for dishonesty in the moment or you pay for dishonesty later. But at one point in time, dishonesty comes to haunt. So here the Gemara gives the sample of who this happened to. Shenemar, as the verse reads, "Vayomer Yirmiyahu l'Chananya, Amen, Ken Yasa Hashem, Yakim Hashem etvaracha." The context is, as Rashi fills in the gaps for us, Hananya was a false prophet. At the time before the destruction of the first temple, when there's lots of uncertainty, and being a prophet was a profitable enterprise because people were looking for hope, for clarity, and you had some fake prophets, including this Hananya. So Hananya prophesied and said, "Don't worry about it. In 2 years from now, God says Hananya, you're going to come right back here with your temple, with everything. You're going to be okay." Whereas Yirmiyahu was prophesying doom. So Yirmiyahu, he said to Hananya, "Amen. Let God do so. May Hashem actually uphold your words." It's a form of flattery, flattering his prophecy, even though the prophecy was a good one, and the flattery seems appropriate. It's like people would say, from your ears to God's mouth, from your mouth to God's ears, right?
Your hope is true.
Your hope is true.
Even though you know this guy's a false.
That's right. But he should have said, no, outright, you're a liar. False hope is no good. Shouldn't have given the false hope. Fake flattery. And therefore, Viksiv, the verse continues to read, top of 42a. Vayi b'shar Binyamin, they were at the gates of Binyamin. V'sham Baal Pekidos, and there were Baal Pekidos means like men of instruction, officers. V'shmoi, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word, let's see. Yeriah ben Shalmiah ben Hananya. Yeriah, son of Shalmiah, son of Hananya, so Hananya's grandson. V'yitvois es Yirmiyahu hanavi, and he captured the prophet Yirmiyahu. Lamar telling him, El Kazdayim Atanoifel, you're falling to the hands of the Kazdim. Yirmiyahu ends up in jail. He went, as Rashi fills in the gaps for us again, he went to go see about an inheritance of some sort. Right? Rashi says after a couple of days, after some time, Yirmiyahu went out of Jerusalem to go to Binyamin, to go to the land of Binyamin, to divide some inheritance that fell into his hand. And Yiriyah, the grandson of Hananiah, captures him and says, "You're in the hands of the Kasdim now." So here is a narrative in which Yirmiyahu gives false hope by falsely flattering Hananiah, giving false hope, and he gets captured by his grandson. And the verse goes on to say that Yirmiyahu said to him, that's why I pulled up the verse. 1 second. Where's the verse? Jeremiah. Yeah, verse 14. He said, Yirmiyahu Sheker. Yirmiyahu says to him, a lie. I'm not following to the Kasdians. But Yiriyah didn't listen to him. And Yiriyah captured Yirmiyahu, and he brought him to the officers. And I talked about that. They beat him, they put him in jail, and so on. They recently discovered, archaeologically, findings that indicate the location of Yirmiyahu's capture. Google it. I don't remember the details, but I remember being very fascinated. Like very recently, in the last 2 years, less. Okay, so this is the end of that statement. That a person who flatters someone else will end up in his hands. These lies don't last, and at one point you're going to pay for the dishonesty.
We found a writing or
What?
something?
I'm going to Google it.
What kind of evidence do you have from a capture?
Archaeological findings of Jeremiah. They found that Jeremiah capture or imprisonment.
Oh,
They found some sort of seals of Jeremiah's captors discovered. There it is. January 2022. It's very recent. Yeah. Institute of Biblical Archaeology. Where is it? They're here. Chizki's Tunnel, Hidden Spring, Nehemiah's Wall. Jeremiah here. Jeremiah was born. The Bible reveals that he's calling the special important. I wonder if this is a Jewish website or perhaps not. There's a seal here. Oh wait, here we go. A seal inscribed Yehuel, son of Shalmiah, mentioned in Jeremiah 37:3 and 38:1. I found a seal of that person, and a seal inscribed Gedaliah, son of Pashur, mentioned in Jeremiah 38:1. They found some sort of seals that indicate where he was captured.
Like a signet?
A signet, yeah. Have a look. Google it. Very, very fascinating.
The seal speaks to their imprisonment.
That's yes, because we have the Torah describes. The Torah describes. Maybe I'll put in Yirmiyahu. I'll come up with Jewish sites. Because the Torah describes his communication to others, and from there, like via letter. Yirmiyahu here. Take me to the same websites. Anyway, Book of Jeremiah confirmed. Archaeology Magazine Archive, 2007. Jesus, okay. Google it. You'll see that's what I was talking about.
Cool.
Anyway, all to say. The flattery, the flatterer ends up in the hands of the flattery, because of
case it was the grandson.
in this the case is the grandson. Another thing that we can add, I was just thinking about this, is because Rashi fills in the background as to why he traveled to Binyamin. The Gemara doesn't mention it, but Rashi fills it in. If he went to go look after a inheritance that came to him, and perhaps that further indicates the mistake of seeking out personal benefit, right? And in that sense, the flattery that Yirmiyahu was saying to him, "Oh, let it be so that your false prophecy should come through, that will come back here in 2 years," was like a selfish. I don't want to say selfish about Yirmiyahu the prophet, like a self-concerned thing, like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be all okay," when he should have been concerned with the truth itself, rather than what he thinks might be beneficial to himself. And that was the same, that was the same thing, going out to look for an inheritance, and that ends up being the same problem that has him captured. Perhaps. Okay, God willing, tomorrow, statements of flattery on a national level. Till now, we're talking about it on a personal level. People who have the character flaw of flattery, or person who flatters someone else. And tomorrow, God willing, a few statements to specifically Rabbi Lezer and then Rabbi Rio about flattery on a national level. A wonderful day and wonderful Chodesh.
Again, Chodesh, all the very best to you, Rabbi. All the very best to you all. God bless you all.